Never revealing no secrets you're keeping. These promises strong as a spell. I'll never tell.
I have a bone to pick with the Mormon Church and with some of its members. Oh, and hi, welcome back to Exmo Lex. Before we get started, reminder that if you like the channel, hit subscribe. It helps out a whole lot. Now, quick trigger warning, this video will talk about the word that rhymes with grape that is non-consensual. YouTube doesn't like when I use the real word, so if you're not in a headspace to hear about this or about how the Mormon Church's purity culture has harmed people, then I suggest just clicking away and watching a different video. This past week, I posted this video on TikTok. Now, I'm not going to play the sound because of copyright, but basically the text says, Mormon church leaders once said, sexual purity is youth's most precious possession, better dead clean than alive unclean. And then the song lyrics play that say, and that made me want to die. I've known about the church teaching this for a long time. I heard it as a teenager, and yeah, it majorly contributed to my depression and my feelings of low self-worth. However, I didn't realize until just recently that this BS is still on the church's website to this day, where young people could so easily come across it during their church studies. That made me furious, and I decided to make a TikTok to point out how gross it is. Why? Well, for the same reason that I make a lot of my content, to inform people. And to criticize the church in hopes that criticizing it will spur change. I hope that the church removes that piece, or even better, adds an addendum to it saying that it was wrong then and it's wrong now, and apologize for it. Now, when I posted that video, I felt pretty confident that Mormons wouldn't find anything to argue about with it. Because generally, Mormons are shifting towards a more progressive view where they're throwing out trash that these old past prophets have said. I figured that if Mormons happened to watch that video, that they would say, oh, yuck, about what the prophet said, and that they would, feel the same way that I do about hoping that the church changes what their website says. But boy, was I wrong. So first of all, where did this statement come from? Who said it and when? Of course, I will leave links to where you can find everything in the description. Originally, this was said in General Conference. The year was 1942. In Prophet and President of the Church, Heber J. Grant's conference report, he included a message to the youth. Yes, this was specifically directed to kids. To the youth of the church, we repeat the foregoing advice, but above all, we plead with you to live clean, for the unclean life leads only to suffering, misery, and woe physically, and spiritually it is the path to destruction. How glorious and near to the angels is youth that is clean. This youth has joy unspeakable here and eternal happiness hereafter. Sexual purity is youth's most precious possession. It is the foundation of all righteousness. Better dead clean than alive unclean. Incredibly, I got comments saying that this statement was taken out of context. This is the whole statement. The next and last line is, times approach when we shall need all the health, strength, and what spiritual power we can get to bear the afflictions that will come upon us. And that's it. That's the end. It starts with message to the youth, says this, and that's it. It's incredible to me that Mormons are sometimes so determined to defend their leaders that they will defend indefensible statements by claiming that it was taken out of context when it clearly isn't. Another defense I saw was, this was said in 1938. Okay, and? Your church claims that it's the only true church on the face of the earth, and it always has, even in the 30s and 40s. The prophets have always claimed to be God's mouthpiece upon the earth, even in the 30s and 40s. And even if that wasn't the case, it may have originally been said back then, but it has been repeated by the church multiple times since then, and judging by the fact that it is still published on the church's website, it is apparently something that the church still stands behind. I mean, they're more than welcome to prove me wrong by removing it, apologizing for it, and teaching the opposite. So let's look at a time when this message was repeated, this time by the second counselor in the first presidency of the church, Apostle Marion G. Romney, once again in a message to the youth in the church's magazine, The Ensign. This article is pretty short and concise, so let's just read the whole thing together. It was published in 1981 and, like I said, is still on the church's website. You will recall Alma's teaching his son Corianton that unchastity is the most serious offense there is in the sight of God, save murder or denying the Holy Ghost. Yep. I was taught this too. I was born in 1993 and I was taught this at church. You will remember too these words from Paul's first epistle to the Corinthians. Know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you? If any man defile the temple of God, him shall God destroy. Some years ago, the first presidency said to the youth of the church that a person would be better dead clean than alive unclean. That tidbit is referencing what Heber J. Grant said in the 40s. I remember how my father impressed the seriousness of unchastity upon my mind. He and I were standing at the railroad station at Rexburg, Idaho, in the early morning of 12 November 1920. We heard the train whistle. In 3 minutes, I would be on my way to Australia to fill a mission. In that short interval, my father said to me, among other things, "My son, you are going a long way from home. Your mother and I and your brothers and sisters will be with you constantly in our thoughts and prayers. We shall rejoice with you in your successes, and we shall sorrow with you in your disappointments. When you are released in return, we shall be glad to greet you and welcome you back into the family circle. But remember this, my son, we would rather come to this station and take your body off the train in a casket than to have you come home unclean, having lost your virtue." That shit is straight up abusive. Can you imagine saying that to your child? It's disgusting. I pondered his statement at the time. I did not then have a full understanding of it that my father had, but I remembered it every time I approached temptation. I understand it better now, and I feel the same way about my sons and grandsons as he felt about me. You were damaged by the purity culture imposed upon your father by the church, which he then imposed on you, and you are now imposing not only on your own children and grandchildren, but all the youth of the church. This man is an apostle. He claims to speak for God. It's disturbing. Let's keep going. I can think of no blessings to be more fervently desired than those promises to the pure and virtuous. Jesus spoke of specific rewards for different virtues, but he reserved the greatest, it seems to me, for the pure in heart. For they said he shall see God. And not only shall they see the Lord, but they shall feel at home in his presence. Here is his promise. Let virtue garnish thy thoughts unceasingly, then shall thy confidence wax strong in the presence of God. The rewards for virtue and the consequences of unchastity are dramatically portrayed in the lives of Joseph and David. Joseph, though a slave in Egypt, stood true under the pressure of greatest temptation. As a reward, he received the choicest blessings of all the sons of Jacob, and he became the progenitor of the 2 favored tribes of Israel. Many take pride in being numbered among his posterity. David, on the other hand, though highly favored of the Lord, indeed he was referred to as a man after God's own heart, yielded. His unchastity led to murder, and the consequences, like Lucifer, he fell, he lost his families and his exaltation. So it has always been and always will be. The laws of retribution are so devised that one cannot with impunity disregard the 7th commandment, thou shalt not commit adultery. The penalty for so doing under the Mosaic law was death. Notwithstanding the fact that in this generation's corrupt permissiveness, the violation of the law of chastity is tolerated with impunity, under God's divine law, it is, as it has always been, a soul-destroying sin. Its self-executing penalty is spiritual death. No unforgiven adulterer is magnifying his calling in the priesthood, and, as President J. Reuben Clark Jr. used to say, the Lord had made no fine distinctions between adultery and fornication. Nor, may I add, has he made such distinctions between adultery and sex perversion. I am advised that in some circles the teachings of personal purity is outmoded, and that promiscuity and other degenerate sex practices are condoned and at times encouraged. Do not be misled by such satanic sophistry, for in truth it is of the evil one. No, Marion, what's evil is you telling kids that breaking the law of chastity in any way, which, mind you, what he's talking about here is all types of what he calls sex perversion, which is basically anything sexual that is not within the confines of a straight married couple, will cause them to have their soul destroyed, suffer spiritual death, and lose their family. That is evil. President Clark, in a conference address in October 1938, said, "Chastity is fundamental to our life and to our civilization. If the race becomes unchaste, it will perish. Immorality has been basic to the destruction of mighty nations of the past. It will bring to dust the mighty nations of the present. You, young people, may I directly entreat you to be chaste. Please believe me when I say that chastity is worth more than life itself." No, it fucking isn't. If you are a member of the church and you are listening to me right now, hear this above all else. What this man said was wrong. If you want to believe in the Book of Mormon, if you want to go to the temple, if you believe in the celestial kingdom, if you think that Joseph Smith was a prophet, okay, good for you. Do whatever is best for you. But do not believe this nonsense. This is the doctrine my parents taught me. It is truth. Better die chaste than live unchaste. The salvation of your very souls is concerned in this. Let me just point out that he called this doctrine, not policy, not opinion, not a teaching, doctrine. He ends with, "Now, my dear friends, I know there is nothing new in what I have said. These things are time-tested. They are true. To this I testify." Well, let me be the first to denounce all of this as absolute horse shit. If you are a member of the church, please do not make the mistake of defending this crap. The number of people who have been harmed by this purity culture from the Mormon church is huge. This made me depressed and suicidal. Starting as young as 6 years old, I was scared for my spiritual well-being because I had been molested. And of course, let's not forget that yet another apostle, Mr. Richard G. Scott, said over the pulpit in General Conference in 1992 that sometimes victims are responsible for their abuse. Don't believe me? Don't worry, I will leave a link to this in the description because it is still on the church's website. Quote, "The victim must do all in his or her power to stop the abuse. Most often the victim is innocent because of being disabled by fear or the power or authority of the offender. At some point in time, however, the Lord may prompt a victim to recognize a degree of responsibility for abuse." And I have Mormons in my comments sections not only defending the church, but also pulling the same BS the church does, blaming victims. Check this one out. "Thanks for pointing it out to all those who are looking for a reason to hate on the church. It was said a long time ago. It's wrong. Don't keep pointing it out and showing youth where to find it. Grateful we've learned better ways of teaching youth. OP is part of the problem." Talk about shooting the messenger. All of this trash I've pointed out is on the church's website right now, which seems to indicate that the church endorses it. I am certain that the church has paid employees whose job it is to maintain what is going on the church's website. And here's the great thing about the internet. It's super easy to change a website. The church could take this down, add an addendum, add a disclaimer, refute it, or apologize for it at any time. They have chosen not to do so. There was another person who, in reference to the article written by Marion G. Romney, said, he related a personal experience that impressed on his mind the seriousness of it. He never repeated that as a thought everyone should adopt. The Bible, Book of Mormon, and Doctrine and Covenants teach the same seriousness of it as well as the ability to repent of it. First of all, this person obviously didn't read or didn't comprehend what they were reading. Marion Romney literally says, quote, "Chastity is worth more than life itself. This is the doctrine my parents taught me. It is truth. Better die chaste than live unchaste. The salvation of your very souls is concerned in this." There's no getting around it. He straight up called this doctrine, and he advocated for the youth to adhere to it. And second, even if he didn't make it super clear that he was using this as a teaching tool, if you are in a position of power and authority over others the way he is, you don't publish your writings in a magazine article that is literally full of sermons to teach your followers and then pretend that what you said isn't meant to influence them. That is the entire point of the ensign. If you are a member of the church and hearing this information makes you angry or upset, don't come at me. Take it to your leaders. Ask them to take it to their leaders. Write to your bishops, to your stake presidents, to your Area 70, to your apostles, to your prophets. Pretending that this stuff didn't happen or trying to blame the people who are pointing it out is not going to fix the problem. It will only make it worse because it shows that you are unwilling to question authority, and it will further alienate young people when they inevitably find out what the church is publicly advocating for. One of the reasons that I choose to talk about this, even though I've left the church, is because so many people I care about are still in it. I don't want my nieces and nephews and little cousins to believe that what these apostles said is truth. And I know that the church often changes when it's under pressure from people both inside and outside the church. So don't be angry when somebody criticizes flaws within the church. Be glad that somebody cares enough to want the bad within the church to change to good. If you disagree with something the church has said, be vocal about it. Advocate for change, ask your leaders to do better, and don't blame victims. Thank you guys for watching, and remember that if you want to see more content, you can follow me on other platforms like TikTok and Instagram. I have links for everything in the description, as well as links to support the channel, including supporting Apostate Coffee. Apostate Coffee is Exmo owned and so lovely, and they sponsor a lot of my content. And if you use the code exmolex at checkout on their website, you can get 10% off. When you use the code shopping at apostatecoffee.com, you not only support an Exmo owned business, you also support this channel in a big way. Speaking of support, a huge thank you to my patrons for supporting the channel. You guys are amazing. And special thank you to Anthony Guthrie, Craig Call, Doug Davis, Mormon Land, The Guiltiest Place on Earth, Jason Wilkins, Melissa Jane, Tans, and the Exmo Candle Company for supporting at the Demon tier on my Patreon. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, share, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!
Never revealing no secrets you're keeping. These promises strong as a spell. I'll never tell.